Hello friends, happy March. I'm Nisa and today I'm going to talk about all the books I finished in February. So February was kind of a weird month. I don't know if it was weird for anyone else, but for me it was like really up and down and just mentally, like, it was a really weird one, and especially with what's like happening in the world right now, it's just, you know, just life. Life is lifing. But I was able to finish 5 books in the month of February, including 1 memoir, 1 short story collection, and 2 books with the word husband in the title. So that's interesting. So let's get started. Drinking some raspberry, I think, tea. So I feel like I have a hard time kind of summarizing the books I read and how I felt about them, so I'm going to consult my book journal. There's prompts in here that kind of help me figure out like how I felt about a book and what words I can actually use to describe it, because I feel like I have a hard time doing that on video without any preparation. So I'm glad I have this to help me explain how I felt about the books that I read instead of babbling nonsense at you for minutes on end. So the first book I finished in February was called The Gallery of Vanished Husbands by Natasha. This was a British book, and it kind of had that British humor that I love in like some of the TV shows I've watched. It just has that kind of, if you're American, it's a bit unique, but I really enjoyed that. It was really good. So this book is about a woman named Juliet who's turning 30, and she is from a small Jewish community in the UK. And this is set beginning in the 50s, and it kind of spans a long amount of time and expands many different kind of characters' journeys growing up, which I love in books. Like, I love a good family saga, and I feel like this was just a good story. Juliet's husband, George, had left her a few years back, and this is kind of a shame she feels in her Jewish community, and her parents kind of putting pressure on her to get him back, because it's kind of taboo during that time, obviously, to be divorced or to have a husband who's left you. But she doesn't necessarily want to get him back, and she has a keen eye for art and paintings. She's not a painter, but she can tell when a painting is good or if it kind of inspires something in someone. So in the beginning of the book, she kind of falls in with this man who's a painter in London and his group of friends who are all painters, and she starts a gallery with them, and it just kind of follows her for years of her life, meeting different people and falling in love and being around art. And then it also follows her 2 children. It kind of features glimpses into their point of views over the years, which I think was really interesting because it was kind of like how Juliet's actions were affecting them throughout. But I really enjoyed this book. I wasn't like obsessed with it. Like, I don't think about it a ton after reading it, but I really enjoyed it, and the writing was really good. I especially loved the some of the quotes about painting and how art can kind of like come alive and change. Like, I thought it was really cool. Like, the imagery of the paintings was really good. And also, while I was reading this, it really reminded me of reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, which is one of my favorite books. Just kind of like the, not pretentious, but just the dramatics of artists. It really reminded me of that. Just like the general vibe was similar to Dorian Gray. So I think if you enjoy that book, you might like this one. And I think this book just has a really good portrayal of how transformative art and paintings are. This is one quote that I really liked that I feel like kind of sums up the writing and the themes of the book. So it goes, "And I discovered that the whole world wasn't like this, that there was something else. He painted me, and he painted a window for me." So for Juliet, paintings and art are kind of like this window to a world where she can actually express herself without pressures from her family and community. I really enjoyed this book though, and I do recommend it. Okay, the next book I finished in February. I started in January and kind of read it slowly while reading other books, but that is My Name's Yours, What's Alaska by Alaska Thunderfuck 5000. Alaska is my favorite drag queen ever. I love her so much, and I just have like a soft spot in my heart for her. So my girlfriend gave me her memoir that she only published a few years ago actually, so it's pretty like up to date with what she's doing now and her experience. But if you don't know, Alaska is a drag queen that was on RuPaul's Drag Race, and she's great. The book kind of follows her from when she was a kid all the way up to pretty much the present, and kind of like her throughout her career and personal life. And this actually included a lot more than I was expecting of her and Sharon Needles' relationship. Sharon Needles is another queen from Drag Race that has kind of gotten a lot of heat the past few years for being very problematic, but they used to date and it was like a very toxic, tumultuous relationship. But anyway, this book, like half of it pretty much, like the whole middle section was kind of about her relationship with Sharon. And there was actually a lot of stuff in here that I didn't know, like a lot of details about that time that I didn't know, even though I, you know, consume a lot of media about her and she said certain things online, but it was like even more that I didn't know. And it was just crazy. It was a lot. Like I didn't realize how bad it was during that time, but I enjoyed this. I just love Alaska, so I'm gonna love reading about her from her own voice, you know? I felt like the ending was a bit rushed because it was kind of like getting up to date on what she's doing now in just a few chapters, but I think it was fine. But I enjoyed this one. Okay, next I read Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. This is a YA kind of medieval romance book, and I loved this. It was so cute. So this book is about Gwen and Art, and they are not in love. So basically Gwendolyn and Arthur are betrothed to be married since they were like babies, and they've like hated each other all growing up, and now they have to kind of get to know each other over the summer because they have to be married soon. But then Gwen ends up falling for this lady knight that comes for a tournament in her kingdom, and then Arthur ends up falling in love with Gwen's brother. So it's just like this adorable like queer mix-up love square situation. I just thought it was so fun and cute. There's so many situations in this book where it's like, you know, when you're reading a scene and it's like you're walking into a room and there are a bunch of people in there and some people know something that the others don't, and then they know something that they don't, and it's just this tension. I feel like a lot of it was like that, which I just really enjoyed, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed Arthur's character specifically. He was just so funny. He was like super sarcastic. He was really charming. This is YA, and I don't read a lot of YA. It's not my favorite genre, but I enjoyed how the characters kind of acted their age. They were all around like 18 years old, and they, you know, they didn't really fully know what they were doing in life and romantically and all this stuff. And I feel like it portrayed them very well. It didn't make them seem like they were like stupid or foolish, but it was kind of just them discovering like love for the first time and being in a kingdom and having to like rule in the future and stuff like that. I really enjoyed how it covered those emotions. It didn't skip over like the hard parts too. So I enjoyed that about that. I think like towards the end it kind of got a little like heavy randomly. Two big things happened kind of back to back that were like a lot for the plot, because I thought going into it was just going to be, you know, just like a silly fun time, which it was, but then kind of these big things happened and I felt like there wasn't enough time at the end to fully like wrap them up and end on a happy note. Like at the end I felt a bit like, oh my gosh, like are these people okay? Like I felt bad for them, and like I felt like they're gonna have to like heal from a lot of stuff. So I wished it was a bit more like, not shying away from heavy stuff at all, but I wish it was a bit more like just overall like happy. But I just enjoyed this so much. I was like giggling throughout it, and it was really fun and cute, so I loved it. Okay, next I read a short story collection called Hall of Small Mammals by Thomas Pierce. This was just a random book that I got from my library because I liked the cover and I was intrigued. It seemed kind of like fucked up, creepy stories that like bend reality, which I enjoy. So I picked it up, and I definitely liked some stories more than others, which is kind of a given if you're reading a short story collection. Overall, I feel like something was just like missing, or it didn't go far enough for all the stories. I don't know, it just felt like a bit off overall, but there were some stories that I enjoyed. So all these stories, each one of them was different, but they all kind of focused on the limits of science and technology and religion and just humanity, and how all of us are kind of connected in these minute ways that can have drastic effects. It's basically the situation of when you cross paths with someone for like a minute and then they go about their day, and then you're like, I wonder where they're going home to, what their life is like, what their past is like, what they feel about different things, you know? It's kind of like that situation is basically this book. The best kind of stories were about that, and it was really interesting to read those. Let me just read some of my notes here, because I wrote like literally a whole page about it, and I don't really remember a lot of what I wrote. So okay, so I said it was disorienting and I wasn't really able to sink into it. Oh yeah, so I feel like this is actually the first short story collection I've read, kind of in general, actually. I think probably the first one I've read besides, you know, stuff I read when I was a kid. I feel like with, you know, novels, you're kind of able to like sink into it and get comfortable, but with these, it's kind of like as soon as you get comfortable in a story, another one starts. So that was kind of weird. But with this one especially, I feel like reading it, I was a bit distracted throughout the stories because I was like trying to find the point in them. Like they had a point, but some of them I was like, okay, what was the point though? And yeah, I feel like for some of the stories I really got and I really connected to, but then the other ones, the characters weren't necessarily likable, but I was kind of just, at the end of the stories, I was kind of like, okay, so it's just like a guy doing stuff and he's just like kind of an asshole. And like, you know, I didn't really understand the point of those ones. And this also came out like a decade ago, so it's not new or anything. Oh yeah, and then I wrote, I think all these stories featured relationships that are a bit clunky, with missed opportunities, things that went unsaid, and just a feeling of unease for the reader as well. Yeah, so I feel like this was kind of more on the pessimistic side of just humanity. Like, not all of them were pessimistic, but it kind of every single relationship was kind of a bit like off, you know, like for one reason or another. It's just kind of the difficulties of just being a human and like being in relationship with other humans. But yeah, I think I was just a bit slow to read this book. I didn't really feel like picking it up ever, but it was okay. Like some of the stories were good, some of them I didn't really love, but yeah. Okay, the next book was my favorite book of the month. It's called The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. This book was so beautiful. This was like only like 100 pages or something. Basically, this is a book about a mother who brings home one day a crane to her 2 children as her new boyfriend. So she comes home and there's just this, her new boyfriend is a crane. And it's from the perspective of the 15-year-old daughter, and then she also has a 6-year-old brother. It's kind of a bit of magical realism, like throughout you almost can't tell what is real, but there is like a bit of magic in the book, but it's kind of a metaphor for parental abuse and neglect. And I just thought this book was so beautiful. The writing was my favorite type of writing. Like after finishing Hall of Small Mammals, I was a bit like, I don't want to read, you know, like I just don't feel like I'm, you know, just instantly loving something. And then I literally started this, read the first chapter, it was like 2 pages, and I was like, oh my god, this is it. Like this is the kind of writing I like, this is what I love reading. So I love that. It was just easy to get into, and it was very heavy, but I enjoyed it so much. And the writing was, the best way I can describe it is intimate but powerful. It was focusing on, you know, just this one person, this one small family on this farm. Every few sentences there would just be this sentence that was like a gut punch and just hit you so hard, like unexpectedly, without even doing too much. It was just so beautiful. Like her writing was just incredible, and I felt like it was just the perfect length. It was just short, but it didn't feel necessarily urgent. The writing wasn't urgent. It was just so gorgeous. And it was actually set like in the future, kind of this, it was like similar to today, like they're in the Midwest of the US, but there's like these drones everywhere that are like cropping the fields. Like there's just this like corporation that basically controls all these drones that crop the fields, so there's like no farmers or anything that do it, so there's just like these machines everywhere. Like a lonely futuristic farm, and that just adds to the feeling of the story. And just the emotions in this book were so incredible. The way the mother was portrayed was amazing. She just didn't care about her kids at all. She would just ignore them and only focus on this crane, and I just like felt it so hard. It was just so beautiful and haunting. And then after I finished it, I was just like, what do I do now? And then I just cried. It was just incredible. I really recommend it. It's just my favorite kind of lit fic to read. Okay, and then I'm currently reading a book called Innards by, by Magogodi, oaMphela, Makhene. I hope I didn't butcher that too much. But this is an author from Soweto in South Africa, and I don't really know anything about that township. It's in Johannesburg in South Africa, but this is a book of short stories all featuring characters within this town, and so far I'm kind of almost done with this. I think that this is, since I don't know anything about this area or like what life is like there, I think it's like a good it's a glimpse into just everyday life there for me. I think like the writing itself can be a little bit confusing for me just because I don't understand like the colloquial way that, you know, people talk there and stuff. It doesn't cater to the Western audience only. Like it doesn't kind of like hold your hand. So I like that about it. This takes place in different kind of periods of time in Soweto, during the South African apartheid, during present day. It kind of draws connections between these times in this town. For the most part, it's really beautiful. It's about displacement and ancestry and diaspora and family and just the everyday effects of apartheid on a town or on a family or on a person. Even though it's a bit hard to read sometimes because it doesn't really have like quotations, it kind of just has like a hyphen and then a quote. But some of the stories I've read have been really beautiful, so I'm glad I'm reading this and getting to experience a bit of Soweto. So those are all the books I read in February. I hope you had a good month and read some good books too, and I'm excited for more reading in March. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!